So most people joined in the meanwhile. So welcome to the webinar about self-service BI and the importance of having a clear data foundation. My name is Peter Belles. I'm working for the company called 2150. We're the company behind the Datavault Builder data warehouse automation tool. You can contact me via email. You can add me to your contacts list on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, I'm open here to answer it. And I'm always happy to discuss any topic about data modeling, data warehouse automation, data warehousing in general. So if you have any questions, and you want to check it or discuss it, please feel free to contact me. So just to understand what my background is, we are a manufacturer of a data warehouse automation tool, the so-called Datavault Builder. We are doing model-driven data warehouse automation. So that's my focus, that's my point of view. So if I'm doing here a presentation, I'm presenting here my personal point of view based on the experience from many projects. I'm working in data warehousing since the year 2000. I've worked on classical Inman data warehouses in the finance industry. I've worked on Kimball designed solutions in telecommunications. And since the year 2012, I'm working mostly or no exclusively on Datavault based data warehouse solutions. And where are we located? We are here in Zurich, Switzerland. You hear maybe my accent. We're working together with a company in Germany. Together we have now more than 130 employees and working now for 9 years on the Datavault Builder tool. As well, if you're interested about what the analysts say about the tool, just in short, what we really focus on and what as well a little bit is the focus of this webinar is time to market. So how do I serve my BI self-service users as fast as possible with as good as possible data? How do I change this really fast? And you will recognize this, but the presentation itself is not about the tool, but about the general approach to self-service BI. As well, our tool runs on-prem and in the cloud, but that's already everything that I wanted to tell you here for a start, and I switched directly here into the topic. If there are any questions, you have in your Zoom bar a section called Q&A, so you can ask questions at any point in time. Just type it in. I will see if I answer them directly or if I will answer them at the end of the session, or if there are any more slides coming explaining exactly what you asked. So what is self-service BI? It is about enabling a business user to use the data for himself. So maybe in the past, we had this classical gas stations. We had some service, somebody was filling in your gas, and we want to replace that and say, okay, if we do it ourselves, yes, we need to do it ourselves, but it's faster, it's cheaper. I can get it any point in time, and I can get it right now when I want it. I don't need to wait until the service guy is coming to me and it's exactly what I want because I selected myself exactly the type of fuel I want to fill in. So that would be like the optimal world. We just go from this situation into this situation. Everybody's happy, everything is fine. Problem is, usually it looks like this. On projects that I've worked that were not looking ahead, what could happen is they just removed this guy filling in the gas and they handed over the data as it is to the business users. And what happened? They mixed different stuff together that doesn't belong together, different grain of data, different kind of data, different perspective on certain processes. They use completely wrong data from the wrong data sources. And they stored it everywhere, in some Excel sheets, in some CSV files. They placed it somewhere and nobody knew anymore what the master data is, what is the default, which kind of data to use. And because it wasn't fitting, because it was mixing together wrong data, they used some crude methods to mix it together. And that's what I call the load script chainsaw massacre. It's you try to abuse your reporting tool to to mix the data together, which is not clean, which is not conformed, together into one report because it doesn't fit. You just do really ugly stuff. The best indicator for such things is if I look at load scripts and I see there's stuff like distinct and similar keywords, I already know that something went wrong and it was just solved by some not matching means. We know this as well if people explaining me why it happened as historically grown load scripts, or as well, very famous, the Excel sheet with thousands of VLOOKUPs because they needed to bring the data together and they did it in Excel themselves. So the question is, how do we omit that? How do we go from this situation in a situation to enable a business user to get his data as good as possible? So our question is, in fact, how to build in this picture spoken a gas station. So what needs this gas station delivering clean and proper data do? It needs to connect to data sources. It needs to integrate the data. It needs to ensure conformity. So if we have different keys, different languages, different meanings in the different source systems, we need to be brought to one level. We need to clean some bad data, some old data, some missing values. We need to apply some business rules because maybe in one source system, the credit bookings and the debit bookings are maybe not having the right sign before the numbers. We need to select which kind of data we want to output. We need to select the level of denormalization. So does it make sense to denormalize certain attributes down at customer or even to transaction level? We need to select the columns we want to output, and at the end, maybe aggregate the data. And yes, the last thing is probably visualizing. And if you look at all these different steps, that's probably a lot to grasp. And if you try to really put this in the load scripts of your reporting tools, then you're probably lost over time. But even if it's too much for this picture of gas stations, so what we need is in proper different layers doing different kind of functions. And I use here the picture of a refinery, and that would correspond to our data warehouse core. So we do some of the work there. Then we go into a dimensional model, which is optimized for querying, very simple, very easy to understand. It allows you only to join stuff together, which makes sense. And then we can go to the self-service BI picture. So it looks already more complicated. So if your managers want to have self-service BI, we need to first go back to them and say, yes, you can have that, but we need to do the proper steps before. Maybe we have done them in the past, but they are not just gone because now the self-service BI user will query his data on his own. And if you do this, then the self-service BI can create this cool dashboard, and you can run your company with some clean, conformed, and quality checked data. But it's not just something that we do in 5 minutes. So what are the different functions and where we can locate them? So in the picture that I have here, connecting to data sources should be done, in my opinion, in the backend. Integration of data as well, conformity, cleansing, and most probably, but this really depends. It can be filtered down even further later, but a basic selection of output entities, which kind of objects do exist, what are our core business concepts, should be done already here, probably at the dimensional level, model layer. We need to select the level of denormalization, select the output columns. And please keep in mind that this, what we are doing here, has a lifespan of usually 10 to 15 years if it's well built. So it will survive many different reporting tools that we have over here. There are functions that are clearly located in the front end, like a reporting tool, could be Click, could be Tableau, could be Power BI, whatever you're using today, but probably the reporting tool you're using today is not the same you used 5 or 10 years back. But most probably the database you're using might be the same. So what are we doing here? We're selecting really the subset of entities we want to use in one report scope. We need to visualize the stuff. And if we have visualized it, maybe we want to add some ad hoc filtering, that we can do some drill downs, stuff like that. And this needs to be done in the front end because I can't And it was tried to do in the past to do all this possible filterings by pre-calculating them, that this is this cube approach. But today the front-end tools are fast enough to do it ad hoc, and you can't think of all possible combinations that somebody wants to filter. So that's very nicely located here. There are other functions where it depends. Applying business rules. Many people would say, yes, it should be here, so it's consistent for all the reports. But what if a business rule is only for one report, and the business users need to find out how they work, and they need to just work with the data to really understand what is in there? Or defining aggregation views. If you always define the same aggregation views, yes, you can add them here, but as I say, aggregating data can be done as very well in today's modern reporting tools. So what we see often is that in the beginning, maybe some of the functions are done more on the front end until somebody finds a good pattern, defines a good business rule, understands exactly what needs to be applied to the data, and then at some point, hopefully hands it over back to the backend. So you need to have a process where people can throw in you stuff they found, so you can build it here and you can share it between all the reports. Because if you look at the lifespan, if at some point you want to replace your front-end tools, you better have your logic built into the backend. And I guess what now some of you think. When do I really need this backend? And what does it mean cost-wise? So let's go first for when do I need it and when for sure I don't need it. So I have here my matrix with level of complexity that I usually talk to our clients and ask them, okay, what exactly you try to achieve? You have one source system, okay, and history is not relevant for you, that's fine. Then you can use most probably your load scripts, it's operational reporting. That might be fine. If you have 2 or 3 sources, yeah, there is probably somewhere a limit. But if you have 4 or more data sources, then you should implement this kind of a backend process, because it will be more costly over time to try to optimize this and squeeze in more and more data sources directly and integrate them in the business users tool. So what we see over time, this always happens. So even if this is the picture in the beginning, it ends up here. And so we started the discussions usually if we talk to clients. Okay, so how many sources do you have? And they tell us we have just one source system. Good, that's fine. And do you have some kind of mailing list that you're using? Yes, okay. And we use some product mapping Excels, is quite often the case. But these are just mappings. So, okay, so we have already 3 different data sources that we would need to mix together if we want to have a picture. Yes, and some of the data is on SharePoint. And we have some suppliers delivering us JSON documents confirming the orders that we have in this one source system. So it would be very good to compare what the offers were delivered in JSON documents and what we booked, and if this matches, and to do some predictions, we need this data. So it adds up, and the longer you speak to the people and ask them specifically about which kind of data they have, you find more and more. Data from the internet, from open data pools, that's everything which comes together. And at the end, already in the beginning for small companies, usually they have a list of 4 or 5, maybe 6 different data sources. And if we have that, we clearly tell them, hey, we already see, even if we don't implement it in the first round, please go for a proper implementation of the data. Use a proper data model to integrate the stuff. And the answer is then usually, yeah, but if I do this, I don't need to do this data modeling stuff. So it's faster and it's better. And what I learned is they do data modeling, but they don't do it explicitly. They don't draw their model, though they don't challenge it. They just, by writing here some scripts, are assuming that there is a kind of data model, but it's never tested. The grain is never tested. The cardinalities are never tested. Usually we can show in many cases that data integrated that way is not 100% correct, because it's never 100% correct at the source. So what is the second aspect? History. So we ask the people, do you need any historization of your data? So you see how it evolves and changes over time. And as well here, Very often in the beginning of a project, they tell us, no, that this part is not relevant. We are not insurance business. We are not banking. They need that they know to look at the history, but we are not that. So how does it move here? There might be legal requirements. That's more in these industries that I mentioned. There might be some values which evolve over time. In telecommunications, for example, we had the concept of customer lifetime value. And you calculate it again and again, and you see if maybe the lifetime value of a customer changes over time. Maybe the kind of calculation changes over time. So you want to see, why did we send him some offers that he's not receiving yet? Stuff like that might be necessary. But what we have in most of the companies is they maybe change their general ledger hierarchy, and now they want to compare it last year to this year, and that's not possible anymore in the source system. And now they come to reporting and say, show me this year's revenues in last year's ledger hierarchy, or the other way around. Happens very, very often. Then a classical case, 1 or 2 years down the road, somebody deleted data in the source, and usually with the comment, we didn't expect it. And honestly, in the meantime, I expect it. We always track as well, delete the data. We track when it was deleted, because this comes up and up again. And in some cases, it's very good reason why they deleted the data in the source. Like these were orders never fulfilled, so they cleaned it up. But still, you need to have to track record that it was there, that it was included in reporting, and that at some point in time it was removed. Because if you want to reproduce your reports from last year, you would fail to do this exactly. And yes, exactly. When were the things deleted? Because then we can judge if it was a proper application of the business process. Now, if we come to the point that they accept that they would need something like this, the answer is usually, but data warehouses are very expensive. I've heard about this, and this is all this machinery, and you need to understand what it does. You need a lot of experts building this stuff. So the main arguments that I heard is, we tried it, it worked in the beginning, but it wasn't maintainable. We have tried it, but it was very, very expensive, so we stopped it. We tried it, and nobody understood how to use it. What kind of data is there? So we stopped with it. And the business users telling me, yeah, we have a data warehouse and they're doing the work, but we need to wait too long until they deliver us new data sets. So we created our own solutions. I have here a server below my desk. And seriously, I found that in a big car manufacturer once, a server with a lot of memory, really fast disks sitting below a desk, doing data integration, because the core central IT team wasn't able to deliver fast enough in the point of view of the business users. And main argument from business users, we don't understand what the people are doing over there. They're doing for sure some great stuff, and they're doing it somehow, but I have no idea what is in there. And that is all correct. I've seen that, and we've been there. And one of the reasons why these arguments come up is, if you're working on a not automated solution, you will have problems with maintainability, you will have problems with costs, you will not have a data model knowing what is in there, and so you will be too slow and you will create your own solutions. The other thing that we need to drive our solution is agility. Because if we don't want to wait too long, we can maybe prioritize our work and say, okay, what is first, what goes second, what goes third. But the data warehouse guys need to be able as well to work on our priorities in the right order. And as you know, priorities change. So it could be that the sales team is starting a new discount, and they need to know immediately how it will affect your business. And maybe even if you start working on other topics, you need to do this discounting first. It's only possible if you work on an agile solution. And the last thing is, we didn't understood what the warehouse do. We need to drive the data warehouse by the business, not by technical people. Yes, we know we need technical people as well, supporting the business users to get what they need in some cases. But the main concept, the language, and the model should be driven by business users, because if they tell us what their main driver is, how their business works. We can create models based on that. They understand what we're doing because it's done in their language, and they're more happy to use what we created together. So just to map it a little bit, to a classical approach to data warehousing is, if we want to have the self-service BI part at the end, we need to have a dimension model before that. We need to have a core. And how can we ensure that this works out somehow? The main solution is we need to somehow automate the whole process. We need to make it agile, and we need to make it business driven. And I will go now through the step how to achieve that. I will use the same icons that you know where we are in this process here, but just that you get a high level overview of this data flow process, how it could look like. So let's go to the next step. Just for repetition, we want to get faster, cheaper, 24/7, and exactly what we want. So the result is we need automation, we need to get business driven, and we need to become agile, because exactly what I want is maybe not what I need. I need to be able to formulate my first expectation, get the data as it is, formulate my changes to it, and have very low change costs. So agility is not only about getting the first version very early, but to reduce as well change costs later, because then I can experiment with the data, give a feedback, and immediately get these things changed in the backend. Good. So how do we achieve that? So how we can solve business driven? Very simple. We need to start working a model in business language. So we shouldn't start with our source systems, the source system table names. We should go to the business users and ask them, what is your business process? What are the objects or things involved in your business process? And if they give us things like, we are servicing flights. This here is taken from a data model from a company doing ground handling at airports. So they told us we're servicing flights. So we added this big blue box with the core business concept of a flight. They told us the flights are going from an origin to a destination airport. They have different ground handlers. They have different caterers. There are airlines involved. One is operating the flight, the other one is selling the flight. So there could be more code-sharing options, stuff like that. There are airplanes. And while they were talking to us in a session with the business users, we added it to our data model. And taking it here to the example I have, so we would draw a model of our factory or our refinery, and automation kicks in and translates it into the real thing, into the technical implementation. And this means that we don't have any break anymore in the different steps. So we would start with the big blue boxes, which are the core business concepts. We would relate them by using relations here, these arrows. We go in the direction of logical data model, and then the translation happens automatically by patterns which are serviced, and the implementation is created. And because this last bit is missing, usually you have to wait several days or several weeks until you get something changed, because somebody manually needs to do this step. And it's important, and that's what we solved with our tool. And what I really recommend you to check is what happens if somebody changes the implementation, because again and again we have seen cases where people need to change something on the database in the ETL flows, and it never made it back to the model, so your assumption about what is happening is wrong. So that's why we always link it in both directions, and that's a very, very important aspect of getting these things business driven, because then you can rely on the model. The model is always used to change stuff, and in the worst case, if somebody changes it on the technical side, you will get informed on the business side. Now, what is as well important, if you look at this diagram, it's very, very simple, because we want to make it as universal as possible to talk to different people in the company. We don't want to have your technical information about primary keys, about foreign keys, about whatever. That's really important on this level. It's not important to understand your business. So that's what we're doing here. You're using here natural language. So we are using here flight. We are not using here any abbreviations and code. And this involves the business users from the beginning. And as well later, if somebody wants to know what is already there in the data warehouse, they can check which kind were already modeled, which kinds were linked with data, so what is already implemented, and at any point in time, they know what they could request or extend the model. So what is then there? So after we created the model, we can link it with our sources. That is everything automatically. So cool. So far, so cool. But we need to add some business rules. And we have done here different experiments by using some natural language descriptions of business rules, and it didn't work out because we needed to be so precise in formulating this in a special kind of language. It was a little bit like English, but it was always more strict, so you couldn't use all the phrases you want. So we decided, no, there is one language of defining business rules, and we're using still SQL code in our example, but we're taking everything away which can be automated. So one of the big things is if you have a data warehouse core and you have this data model, usually to formulate a business rule, you need to join different stuff together. That can be done automatically, visually, and then the business rule becomes very, very simple. So technical people can write it and power users. How many power users do you have in a team? We have seen companies that like 5% of the report users were power users. We have seen smaller companies where maybe like 20% of the report creators or self-service people were enough experience to write as well as SQL statement. The good thing is that we use version control and everything. They can't destroy anything. They can propose stuff. But even if they do like a sample in their Excel report or in their Click report, it's very simple to copy the code over here and place it in the right layer to get applied here. So it can be that you start in your, as I mentioned in the beginning, in your report, developing a business rule, and then copying it over here and put it into operations like this. And here now we come to the next layer, the access layer. And here still, even if we use a normalized core, what we do in our case with the Datavault approach, we need to make things simple here. So we are going into the whole Kimball speak because Kimball had a very good focus on explaining what business users need and what they understand and how to make a model so simple that you can't get it wrong. Because if you're in a normalized core and you join the wrong stuff together in the wrong order, you can get stuff like fanning traps. The fanning trap means that if I would start with an airplane and join it together with all my flights, the same airplane gets listed several times because this airplane has more than one flight, hopefully. And in the dimensional model, we always start with the lowest grain. In this case, it would be the flight. You can link stuff to the airplane, but if you would start with the airplane, you can't go back to the flight. And here we see already, here we benefit already that we created a proper model in the core layer, because this is helping us now to prevent errors. And that's one of the most seen errors if I'm doing reviews, is that people join stuff together on different grains in the wrong direction, creating fanning. And if you would join the airplane with the flight, you would recognize it because it makes no sense. But if the grains are very similar, but still not exactly the same, and your difference is only 2, 3, or maybe 4% of the data that is duplicated, you will maybe not recognize it immediately in the aggregated figures. That's really dangerous, so you should prevent it model driven. So what can a business user do here? And that's something really that the self-service user can do. If he has a visual interface, he can select all the involved entities, all the linked entities, go to the attributes, select them, and rename them. And that's a straightforward experience that can be completely automated and should be automated in the realm of the data warehouse and not in the report, because if I do this in the data warehouse realm, I'm doing it once. I define once my flight interface and I can reuse it in different reports. And not only that, if at some point I need to replace my reporting tool later, and this happens over the lifespan of 10 to 15 years, I can reuse the same object in no new reporting tool. Some people say, yeah, but we will not replace our reporting tool. Maybe not replace, but maybe extend. So Maybe you have a few Excel users. Maybe you have some users doing some samples in Power BI now, even you're using Click or Tableau generally and stuff like that. So this will happen over time. So if you have it modeled here on this layer, you're pretty safe that you can reuse the stuff. And if you're doing it right and everything is model driven, you generate metadata. And this metadata can be used to automate your load scripts. And now we're here where we wanted to go. So now I have shown here an example that I have created 3 different objects in my data warehouse. And I'm presenting this here with Click because Click is the reporting tool I worked with in the past, and it's the only tool I know how to operate, but it would work exactly the same in Power BI, in Tableau, in sub business objects, in Cognos, MicroStrategy, or Excel, or whatever tool you're using. And the idea is that as we have created everything based on a model, we can export the metadata, we can select just what we need, and the reporting tools are able to write the report model in the tool itself completely automatically. So to go from step 1 flight to the second step flight with 1 dimension, or the flight with 2 dimensions, I haven't written 1 line of code. And this is exactly what you should expect from your self-service BI solution. You just select the objects you want to include, you click the button, and on the fly, the stuff is loaded. And here we see now the big benefit of the Kimball style output. As it's created as a star, we don't need to be afraid of fanning traps, and we can here take the airport name and the airline name, put them in the same diagram, and we're sure that the data doesn't get wrong because there are always only many-to-one relations from the center to the outside, so it's preventing of mixing up stuff in the wrong way. So if you have a solution and you're expecting self-service BI, that is that simple as it should be, but it means that you need to have all these layers that this is possible at all. So what do we do for agility, or what does it mean? Agility is about delivering the features with the highest business value first. The problem is, it's not about just selecting the features with the highest value and doing them in the order, but it can be that your priorities change. As I mentioned before, there might be some sale going on, some Black Friday thing, and you really need to deliver something first. So your solution for the data warehouse, if you're integrating data there, needs to be so flexible that at least every second week, every week, or even faster, you can reprioritize. So you need to work on small features, and if one feature is developed later, but it should be deployed earlier, it should be possible. So check your solution for that, because otherwise you will run into trouble. Otherwise you will say, I have a high priority thing, and they will tell you, yes, but you need to wait until we deploy all the stuff that is not that important and not finished yet, but yeah, it's not possible that this feature overtakes it. So that's really something important to check. And that's possible in our solution, but as well in others, if you work on this Datavault approach, because Datavault is exactly about this modeling technique, which allows you to deploy stuff that was developed later, earlier. Plus, you need to go into different methods like CI/CD, which we are supporting, but that's a core feature you need to check for. So just to recap, deliver value early, yes. Get feedback from the users, because it will be not the final solution, because if you deliver early, it will be not like the best solution ever, but it will be a very good solution already solving a part of the problem. But they will need to give you feedback. Then you need to adapt. And it's much simpler to start a conversation with the business users if you deliver them already at least not so clean data, because they can have a look at it, they can take it in the preferred reporting tool, they can check it, they can group it, they can test for certain special cases, and they are much better able to formulate their expectations and for their business rules. And most important is, if you deliver too late, business users will always find, and they have to find a solution to solve the reporting needs. It can be like 1,000 different Excel sheets flying somewhere around in the company. It can be a long load script. I think the longest load script in Click that I ever found was about 6,000 lines long. And the funny thing is that when they called to check on what they shall change, they didn't ask about how can we like put this in a proper way that is maintainable, but they told us just, oh, we have a small performance issue. But the issue was not the performance. Yeah, it was as well the performance, but 6,000 lines of code, nobody knew anymore what was in there. So we needed to split it in smaller chunks, create a proper model, and based on what we have seen in the script, they have created their own model, but not explicitly. It was everything in this really difficult code. And it took about, I think, 3 weeks until we understood completely what was in there, because many people over the years changed stuff in it. So don't get in this situation. Go in the proper defined approach, model first, test small bits, and document every small bit, and that will save you from all these scenarios. But that it works, things need to be automated, because agility means that you deploy quite often. So if you go for the full ITIL approach, where you have development, test, and production environments, you need to do this deployments every second or every week. And changes need to be very cheap. So you have to have as well the modeling technique supporting this kind of changes. And only then everything falls into the right place and everything starts working. And so that's why we come to the last bit, to automation. And if people ask us, yeah, what helps automation us with? It saves a lot of time, and it saves you the boring work, because it can generate from the data model staging loads, it can create the loads into the core, it can automate the creation of historization, it creates the interfaces automatically, it writes the documentation, it solves you the deployment part and the versioning. So everything that you need, and you say, okay, good. But if I do very good scripting and I take some Excel sheet and I generate just my code, I'm as quick as possible. And it's the same. I will save this time as well. And the point, theoretically, yes. But automation is a little bit about more, because over time, in this 10 to 15 years that we mentioned, there will be coming into reality new kind of best implementations. So we could have like this old gas station, a newer one that I had this example with, and then at some point somebody comes up with power to load your electric car, and at some point somebody comes up with these Unity cool stations that are very, very fast in charging. And if I manually develop my stuff, I need to do it again and again and again. Every time there's technology advances, I need to recreate my solution manually. And some people came up and were saying, yeah, but then why don't we use like ETL tools? And ETL tools is the same. It's just using visual representation of your code and doing stuff again and again. If I need to change my technical implementation, I will repeat it and do it every 2 or 3 years again and again. And especially with today's cloud databases, if we talk about Snowflake, they are delivering you new features in every 3 or 4 months. So if you want to take advantage of these new features, you need to adapt your solution again and again, write your update scripts and stuff like that. And this can be solved by capturing what our target is, because the business cares about implementing a business model, not about the technical solution it solves it. And like this, we can regenerate just from the model again and again using the automation tool the solution without spending our money on update scripts or on the new patterns. And this is exactly what we are doing with Datavault Builder, that we're maintaining for our clients this kind of patterns, because our clients should care about the business model, and we are caring about the technical implementation together with the database vendors to see which kind of new features they have and what we shall do. So this was already a little bit the high level picture of what is the target. Just about our tool, to recap, is we are automating all of this process that I explained here in this webinar by creating here the backend. We're creating here the connection point with the dimension model and allowing you to pull out the data. But as well, we're doing more than that, because this is, and I don't want to expand the scope of this webinar too much, but in fact is Data modeling and creation of the code is one aspect. You need to automate as well your infrastructure, your deployment, what I a little bit mentioned already in the agility part. So you need to run complete deployments automatically using your build pipeline tools. You need to hand it over to operations. You need to run your job. You need to schedule them. And at some point, maybe solve some high availability issues. And that's everything covered now in a very good automation tool. And if you check for solutions like that, please really don't look just on this aspect, because that's it's not simple, but it's much simpler to solve this issue than to solve the whole process. And this is what the backend people need to keep in mind if they're creating a good solution that serves the business user at the end. So just to make it visual, in the past, just for fun, that's a project from 2006, and that's where this picture is coming from. Data warehouses are very expensive. We had like tools for data modeling. We created our ETL flows and database structures. So we had a special kind of ETL tool license. We used some patterns for STD type 2 loading. We needed orchestration and scheduling by external tools to parallelize everything. We needed to write our documentation manually. We needed some special tools for deployment from your development to your test and your production environment. Then we used some even other tools after we've done all this step for data profiling and returned back to the drawing board. And at the end, we generated some data lineage. And this is really where this picture comes from, that data warehousing is expensive. It was, and it was terrible to maintain because you needed to upgrade all the different parts, all the softwares, every interface was creating costs. And that's what we're removing by using here one tool for the full data warehouse process. That's not just us that is saying that. We have as well analysts like Bark judging that we have the best time to market, product satisfaction as well, price to value in the area of data integration, even if compared to other tools from other some big software vendors. Good. So now we come to the session where you can ask your questions. Okay, one question is, do I still need to have technical people? Yes, let's be honest. Self-service BI means that you have a team preparing the data for self-service use. It's not that everything is like magic bullet that solves your issues, a tool solves your issues. No, you still need to have some technical expertise, but the teams can be smaller. They can work more on the problems of the business users instead of caring about technical details, but still without having people as well understanding your maybe database technologies and knowing how to write SQL code, it will be very difficult to integrate all your data coming from different sources. One interesting question, yes, about costs. It depends. It depends on the database technology you're using, because there are databases like Oracle, like SQL Server, which are more built like for operational reasons, and you can use them for data warehousing. There you will have probably more DBA as well necessary to run your solutions. There are solutions more created towards the end of data analytics like Exasol databases or Snowflake, where many of these maintenance processes in the backend are as well automated. So if you have Snowflake, you nearly never need a DBA with it. You can start right away, but you pay then per use, or with Exasol, you pay for the size of your processing database, stuff like that. So it really depends on how much data you have, how fast you need to process it, how fast you need to query it. But I can tell you that even for smaller companies, having really small ID stuff, now with this kind of solutions, it is possible to create their data integrations like for big companies that was only possible with 10 to 15 people integrating just data in the past. So we can reduce this to a few people. So which kind of data sources can be connected? Now that I can answer for the Datavault Builder, and we're connecting to everything which has a JDBC connector, everything which is delivering either files like separated file, tab separated files, or comma separated files, JSON documents, XML documents. And we have the possibilities to use a technology called gRPC connector where we can use Python classes to connect to data sources. And with that, we were able so far to connect everything that we needed to Azure Blob Storages. We have a Tina driver built in to connect to S3 files. So if there's any specific files that you're interested in, I can check on that. But so far, we were able to use a lot of the stuff. And we're as well able to use built-in connectors. If you're using like technologies like Snowflake, they have built-in connectors, and we can connect to this ones and use them as well if it makes sense. Good. So I would have a short question, maybe if you, I don't know if we have here as well, Paul. So just that I understand of the people that participated here, if you're planning to automate a data warehouse, if you're going in the direction of self-service BI, if anybody wants to give me feedback, I would be very happy that we know a little bit what your plans are. So you can answer that. And while this questionnaire is open, I would go to my last slide here and now ask you the hypothetical question. So what will be your choice? Creating a proper solution and get your nice dashboards, or are you heading in this directions, maybe not based on your choice, but because your company thinks that this is not necessary? And I've seen this a lot, that I've talked to people responsible for the data area, and they told us, yes, we understand that we need this, but our management thinks this will do it. And usually I don't hope it ends up for you like this. So I hope you enjoyed a little bit my presentation, that you could learn a little bit what our point of view is, why we think that proper data integration is necessary, but as well that the automation of this step is necessary to spare you from high costs that such solution had in the past. So just to get as well to the feedback that we got from the poll. So are there people planning to automate their data warehouse? Yes. Within the next year, yes, otherwise probably you wouldn't be here. And do you plan to migrate to the cloud as well? Interesting. About 1/3 of the people are planning to move to the cloud within the next year. So that's very interesting. And yes, for the people interested in the Datavault Builder, please feel free. We have webinars every Friday as well, especially about the tool, presenting them more, how it works, how is the touch and feel, and how you can use it for your own needs. So thank you a lot, and looking forward to hearing from you on other webinars or in direct one-to-one sessions. I'll stay here for 2 more minutes if there are any more questions, and otherwise I thank you a lot and wish you a nice afternoon or morning wherever you are located. So I will finish now the webinar. I thank you a lot and wish you a nice day.